All right, folks, so we are right at 11 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and start. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We've got David Zelasco here with us to talk about net metering. He's got 7 kind of key points and takeaways that he will be sharing with you regarding net metering. And I will just let David go ahead and take it away.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. My name is David Zelasco. I'm a solar consultant with Third Sun Solar, and we are a full-service solar installation company and been doing solar in Ohio for 20 years now. This is actually our 20th year anniversary, and through that time, we've done over 1,000 systems, residential, commercial, nonprofits, you name it. We've worked with a lot of different types of customers. So for the last couple of weeks, we've been doing these webinars, and it's a good way to keep educating people while we work remotely. And if you're interested in other topics that we've covered Solar 101, so basically a broad level view of how solar works on the residential side. We've done a commercial solar webinar, as well as battery technology with the new Teslas and different lithium-ion battery options that we offer. And also did another one on financing. And so today we will be talking about net metering. So this is basically how solar can connect to the grid. And what we'll be talking about is how net metering works, how this will lower your electric bill, how net metering and batteries work together, why net metering is important, who is eligible for net metering, and discussing net metering with third-party suppliers. And then also, how do you become a net metering, and what is net meter customer, and what does that process look like? So to start how net metering works, it's important to understand how grid-tied solar works. And so I'm going to talk mostly things here that are on a residential side, but these net meter can be applied to other nonprofits and commercial and even city-owned properties. So you have panels on your roof, or they could be on the ground, and they are collecting daylight, sunlight, and using that energy, converting it to energy and electricity for the house. So it goes through the panels into an inverter, where it takes the sun's DC energy, converts it to AC, and then that energy is going to be used in the house first. So whatever loads are being used, the solar energy will provide electricity for those loads. And then if there's more solar than the house needs, which this is around the season, we're seeing that quite frequently, then the excess power will go back into the grid through a bi-directional meter. And that meter will show and measure power that you sent to the grid. And at the end of the billing period, your utility will take a look, okay, they sent us this much excess power with their utility or with their solar, and they've taken this much kilowatt hours from us, from the grid. And so the difference between that is how you're billed or potentially credited. And this process enables net metering. So the new meter that the utility will provide, and we'll talk more about this later, this is measuring that power going out. And it is going to be basically sending them, like I said, those numbers in and the difference between what you took and what you use. And net metering now becomes more of an accounting process that they use to see how much you're getting charged or credited. And so here, we'll take a look at someone's usage to explain net metering. And how we develop this is, if you're interested with an assessment, Caitlin will provide a link for you to sign up. And what we do is just a consultative approach, looking at your energy usage and getting an electric bill. And so we take a look at your usage and also your utility company and utility rates. And so in this graph here, you'll see that solar, you can see that the solar is in yellow, so that's production. And then in the green is someone's historical energy usage. And so we provide this with all our customers and take a look at how much solar is going to be produced based on their specific site conditions and match that up with their specific energy consumption. So I want to show you by starting at the month of July. And so how I'm going to explain net metering now is based off the public utilities in Ohio. And we'll talk more about how that changes, but the process here is that everything in July, you can see from the production down, this power is going to be offset at that full retail rate because you're producing what you're consuming. So everything in this section is going to be valued at that full retail rate. Everything above this is now what you're going to be charged for. So this offsets each other, and then this is what your new electric bill would be. So in this example, that electric bill is about 75% of what it normally would have been because of solar and net metering. Now, if we go to May, you'll look that the production at this site is about 400 kilowatt hours more than what they consumed. So that means they sent an excess power to the grid. And just for numbers, let's just assume that they sent an excess of 400 kilowatt hours. So everything from the green below, again, just like in July, here, this is going to be offset at the full retail rate. And then this area here where you're sending more power to the grid, we call that the net excess generation, and you'll be credited at a net excess generation rate, which is typically about a third of the retail rate. And so here, March, April, May, and June, you can see that at this site, you're creating net excess generation each month. So in March, you have that net excess generation credit. You'll have a negative dollar balance on your bill, and that'll roll over to the next month. And so this will keep rolling over. And so this month in July here can even be offset by that credit that you accumulated through net metering in those previous months. So we look at, again, your utility, how they treat net metering, what type of credits they get for this net excess generation. And then for sizing, we look at your motivation. So are you motivated by you want to offset as much as possible? Your main goal is to lower your carbon footprint and be environmentally motivated? Or are you more concerned about ROI or maybe even a balance? So with our knowledge of how this works, we can size up a system that can meet those motivations and make sure that you have a right system for your site and for your goals. And so here, this is in AEP territory. This is an actual customer with their electric bill. This is not matching that last graph I showed you, but this is an example that we have. And you can see here, May, June, July, August, September, and October, these kilowatt hours are in the negative. So that means in May, they had an extra kilowatt hour from what they consumed that they sent to the grid. And then in June, they sent an excess of 539 kilowatt hours back to the grid. So that again is going to roll over from month to month and allow you to reduce the cost of your electric bills in the winter months where we don't get as much production out of our solar. And again, this is going to be different for everybody, but we're able to take a look and with our experience can give you some great forecasting of how your new electric bill will look. So net metering, the process I've just explained with the grid-tied system, that previous diagram had no battery involved in it. And so when you're grid-tied and with new battery technology, you're able to still participate in net metering. The only difference is that your battery system will take that net excess generation and that'll be included into the battery and stored at a later date when either when the home needs it or in the event of a power outage. So instead of sending that excess power back into the grid and potentially getting a lower credit for that, then you can store it in your battery and then use it on site when it's needed. So why is net metering important? Net metering has been around for a couple of years, maybe 10 plus years or so. And what it does is it gives you credit and a value for the services that you're providing, not only to your house, but also to the grid. So by you sending excess power back to the grid, then that's less power and demand that the utility needs to produce. And so what is happening is when you send that back to the grid, it's literally going down the line on your electrical lines and can be even used in your neighbor's house. But your neighbor's purchasing their power from the utility at the full retail rate and like they normally would. So utilities say, okay, you're providing this service, the grid will give you a credit for that. Now, net metering rates have changed, and some may argue that they're not exactly, the credits that you get could be a little bit more beneficial to the homeowner, but nonetheless, there is still a credit and a way that you're able to lower your electric bill by generating power at the point of consumption. So who is eligible for net metering? Again, we take a look at what utility you have. And so in Ohio, there is a Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. It's a state-run regulatory body that is, the members are appointed by the governor. And so utilities like the First Energy Company utilities, so that could be Ohio Edison, Toledo Edison, Cleveland Illuminating Company, as well as AEP, Duke Energy, Dayton Power and Light. These are all regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. So there are specific rules that the PUCO makes on net metering, and these companies have to follow. And so the example that I've just provided was based on these public utilities. That's a majority of what we see from our customers. And so the rules that they state are that, again, any excess power must go through a bidirectional meter, and then you can get credited for that based on what you've consumed in that month's time. And recently, in the fall of 2019, they've increased the capacity of a system size that you can install. So previously, the rule for net metering was that you can only produce 100% or below of your annual consumption. They've bumped that up now to 120%. And so you can interconnect a system and perform net metering at 120% of your current annual consumption. But sizing up that system, that size, may not always make sense for people. So again, we look at your main motivation, and if it's carbon offset or if it's economics or a mix of both, we size it up so that you can get the best return on investment as well as meeting your carbon offset goals. So those are the public utilities. And you can go to their website. They have an example of what net metering looks like and all the rules and regulations that we comply with. Now, throughout the state, some municipalities have their own city-owned electric grid and bill their customers and residents for electricity. And so they are not regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. They can essentially establish their own rules for solar. The good thing is many of them have recognized the importance of customer-owned solar and the importance of lowering carbon emissions within their cities. So many of them do have net metering policies, but they can be different from city to city. And again, this is where our experience comes in. We've worked with a lot of them. We understand what some of their fixed charges are, what their net excess generation credits, and their capacity limits are as well. And now on the other hand, there are some that don't allow solar at all. There are some municipalities that won't allow you interconnect into their city-owned electric grid or allow you to participate in net metering. And over the years, we've come across these, but we've also been successful in changing some of these policies at the local level. And so we had a customer a few years ago in a Northeast Ohio community in Lorain County that their city electric would not allow solar or do any net metering. And so by that customer advocating to city council members and local officials, they actually got that changed. And now he was the first person in his city to have solar. He's grid tied, has net metering, and he's getting a fair value for what he's sending back to the utility company. So if your city does not allow it, we could help you, arm you with some information on how solar works, the different codes that we comply with, and we can see if we can get those rules changed with the help of local officials. Now, in Ohio, we also have an abundance of rural co-ops. So rural areas have member-owned co-ops that provide them electricity. And these are made up of board members that are elected by the members. And they have different rules from municipalities and also the public utilities. Majority of them do allow net metering, but they have different specific rules to how they're credited and also fixed service charges. And so that is something that we'll look at too with you. And when we provide economic data on your system, we'll take into account again all of that information. So what about third-party suppliers? Ohio, we have public utilities, but a portion is slightly deregulated in the state. And so if you have AEP, Duke Energy, or any of the First Energy companies, you can shop around and use a third-party supplier. They're called competitive retail energy service providers. So we call them CREST providers for short. And these are companies or nonprofits that can offer you a better supply rate or a different supply rate for your electricity and just your supply portion of your bill. So that's not including generation or transmission or distribution, it's including the supply section of your bill. And these, since they are not regulated, these CREST providers don't necessarily have to provide net metering. Now, the Public Utilities Commission have encouraged them to do so, and a lot of their customers are moving in that direction. So it is something that some of them are offering. So again, we'll work with you to make sure that they are offering net metering and an understanding of how CREST provider contracts work in conjunction with solar. I've listed two here, NOPEC, this is Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council. So a lot of First Energy companies and a lot of communities, especially in Cuyahoga County where I live, they aggregate with NOPEC and use them as supply. So they do offer a form of net metering and compensation for net excess generation. as well as SOPAC in Southeast Ohio. And again, there's 1,000 CREST providers out there that can, promise you savings over time, but I would be careful, and I'm happy to talk and evaluate rates with you. But NOPAC and SOPAC, they do a good job, and they also provide a lot of energy efficiency grants to local communities. One in Cuyahoga County received grants for LED upgrades, electric vehicle charging, all through NOPAC. So they do a good job at being transparent with their rates, providing stuff with the local communities, and then also allowing solar to be interconnected and providing some form of net metering. So how do you become a net meter customer? So at Third Sun Solar, we do everything in-house, and we are full turnkey. So we take care of all the consulting and design work for you, and as well as permits and interconnection process with your utility. So first step is to sign up, get information on an estimate. Myself or our other great solar consultants will work with you to analyze your utilities, see how net metering works for your specific area, and then size up a system according to those net metering guidelines and your personal motivations. And then once you sign up with us and we're going through the permitting process, we apply for interconnection and net metering agreements on your behalf. So our costs include all that work, and we make sure that when you're up and running that you're all set up, and the utility is aware of your system, and that they know that this is going to be a net metered house and also need a bidirectional meter. And so the final step of this is getting a local inspector to approve the system. So everything we do is code compliant, and a lot of times above and beyond, in terms of the quality that we offer. And then once that is inspected, that'll give the green light for the utility to bring in and install a bidirectional meter. And so once this is installed, this will be able to show power that is flowing from the grid like you normally would, but then also measuring power, again, that's going out into the grid. And this allows them to see how much you sent them versus what you took, and then bill you accordingly to those net metering policies. So once this is installed, that's the green light. You can flip the switch and turn your solar system on, start saving immediately. And then what our consultants like to do is, after the first full month of you having solar on your house, we'll actually evaluate your electric bill and make sure that you understand, okay, this is how much you sent to them in this billing period, and this is how much you're getting either credited or how your bill is being reduced by these net metering policies. So that is something that we like to offer and touch base with our customers so that they're understanding and how to read their electric bill for the years to come that they have solar. So these are our easy steps to solar. If you'd like an assessment, you can sign up here at this link, and I'll be happy to speak with you and evaluate your electric bill and design how solar would work at your property. And as a reminder, we are seeing a big demand, and our schedule is still pretty packed because of this tax credit ramp down. So currently, there is a 26% federal tax credit that is available when you install solar, and that is good until the end of this year. So the system has to be installed by the end of 2020 to get a 26% tax credit. If it's installed next year, that tax credit goes down to 22%, and then it's currently written that in 2022, your tax credit goes down to 0%. So we're seeing a lot of people adding solar to their home to take advantage of this credit, and to add solar and start saving right away on their bills. So from there, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. and I'll let Caitlin moderate that.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. That was a lot of great info. I think one of the biggest barriers people face to going solar is that there's a lot of unknowns out there, and net metering is definitely like one of the largest unknowns, and definitely something that we get the most questions about. We've got some folks who are interested in asking questions, so I'll let some more questions come in. Feel free to use the Q&A feature. If you navigate to the bottom of your screen, you can use the Q&A feature or the chat feature to send us your questions. Anything David said that you would like clarification on, or I guess if you're a solar customer too, how has the experience been with your net metering? Do you have any questions as a solar customer? And we'll get David to answer some of these questions. So we've got one from Kevin. He asks, could you recap the net metering decision-making rules? Public utility charges payback is governed by the PUCO, but local municipalities and rural co-ops are independent to decide what charge payback is viable.
Correct. Yeah. So like you mentioned, the public utilities have the PUCO. That board takes a lot of information and how solar works, and consulting with different stakeholders and what that would look like. And so that is how their process is. The Public Utilities Commission has a great resource on their website and the exact code and net metering rules that they have, and may be able to answer more on the process side. And then municipalities are and the member rural co-ops, they're designed, right, to listen to their constituents. And that is how, if they're getting a lot of demands on solar, and they don't have any net metering policies, that's where we've seen them change course, even seeing them update infrastructure, where they make it easier for people to go solar. So the processes are very different, but if you have a municipality and a rural co-op, make your voice heard and see if that's something that can be changed if they're not allowing solar and net metering for you. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and Kevin, let us know if you have any follow-up questions. We've got another question. How do we know what rate they're crediting us back? Where do we find that on the bill? This particular person has Cleveland Public Power.
So Cleveland Public Power is the example of a municipality. So they offer solar interconnection and a form of getting credits and net metering. It's going to be different than if you have the illuminating company. So what we do is we look at utilities provide their tariffs. So if you're on a residential tariff, we take a look at what the cost of energy is, and then they also provide what their cost of a credit can be. And sometimes this fluctuates based on season or also wholesale cost of electricity. So most of the time we see a credit anywhere from 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Some municipalities can be higher, but again, it's going to be based on your specific utility. So we have a lot of Cleveland Public Power customers, both on the residential and the commercial side. So I'd be happy to analyze and take a look at your bill to see how that works for you.
And she also asked a follow-up question. If she's not getting that much net credit back from Cleveland Public Power, is it still worth getting battery for excess storage? And does battery qualify for the 26% credit?
So that's a great question. Battery technology has a lot of benefits. So not only does it allow you to store and save power instead of sending it back at a lesser rate to the grid, but it also is like an emergency backup generator. So if you lose power, you can size up your system, and when there's the solar is producing, it's charging that battery and feeding energy into your loads while your grid is down. Depending on the rate for that net excess generation, that can depend on the better economics for a battery. And so again, looking at your rate will help determine that. But it's important to note that there's more benefits to that battery than just that savings. Makes you more self-reliant and have a backup energy source when the grids go down. And then if you do couple solar with a battery, then that does qualify for the 20%, 26% federal tax credit. So if you do those together, or if there's possibility that you can add a battery to an existing solar system, you could potentially get a credit for that as well. We usually will point you to your tax professional to see the specifics on that for you.
Great. And we have questions from Carol and Amy. Hi, Carol and Amy, about the SOPEC, the new SOPEC announcement, and that's here in Southeast Ohio. Different questions about their new interconnection agreement. And I will just go ahead and say, I can have Jamie, our Southeast Ohio representative, reach out to both of you. She's becoming very familiar with this new announcement from SOPEC, which we're really excited about. And David's up there in the northern part of the state. So we'll have Jamie get back to you with questions, with answers to those questions about SOPEC. Let me see. All right. And you can continue dropping any questions that you have about net metering or anything really solar in the chat feature in the Q&A box. And I will go ahead and let you know that at the end of this webinar, we will send you a follow-up. You'll get a recording of the webinar, as well as information about how to sign up for additional webinars, and also a survey. We're interested to know from you, what kind of info would you like to learn from us? What are some of your barriers maybe to going solar that, that having more information about would be helpful for you? And yeah, we'd like to answer those types of questions. So please participate in that survey. I am not seeing any additional questions coming through. I'll give it a couple more seconds to see if anyone has any additional questions for David. And I'll also go ahead and say, if you have missed some of our webinars, you can type in Third Sun Solar on YouTube. We've got a lot of recordings of David to date doing a lot of the webinars that he mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. We have a question from Omar. What are the typical cost differences between roof mount and ground mounted systems?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Omar. So typically, a ground mount system will cost a little bit more because of the added insulation requirements. So when you have a ground mounted system, we have to trench from that array location and running conduit, usually at 100 to 200 feet to your main electric box. So that adds some extra cost, extra wiring, conduit runs that we normally don't see on the rooftop. And then also, when we put them on the roof, the racking systems, they're designed to last 25, 30 plus years. And when we put them on the ground, we want to have that same longevity. So we make them very sturdy. We usually dig about 3 to 4 feet of holes, fill those with concrete, and make sure that is protected and meets any of the high wind speeds in your area. So because of that, the ground mount can be slightly more, cost more, but it may also be able to produce more for you. So a ground mount, we can place them facing directly south where you get the most production, and then put them at an ideal tilt and then in a location that doesn't have a lot of shade. So while it may cost more, you may get a better ROI on it, depending on those site factors.
Yeah, that's a great question. And Omar, we will follow up too. We have an upcoming presentation about ground mounted versus roof mounted arrays and kind of the different variants in that. I'm checking here. Can you repeat, if you are using a third-party provider, should you switch to AEP for a provider for the best savings?
So it depends on what their rules are for net metering. And again, we'll take a look at what your rate is getting, what you're getting charged for your rate versus what AEP can offer. So we can weigh that as part of the discussion. And then also looking at who that specific supplier is. Some suppliers will not do any net metering. And some suppliers, I don't see this mostly on the residential side, but I see it sometimes on the commercial side where they have stipulations in their contract of no on-site generation and no solar. So it depends on who your supplier is. Most of the time, it may be better to go back to AEP. But again, we take that by case.
So you kind of would consult to see which would be better and if the third party allows it.
Correct. Yeah. And like I said before, there's thousands of these suppliers and there's new ones coming into the market all the time. So it's taking a deep dive in what they offer is important.
Great. All right, I don't see any additional questions, but feel free, you have our contact information after signing up for this webinar, so feel free to shoot us an email, and I will be following up with you all with a recording of the webinar as well as a survey to learn what additional things you would like to learn from folks like David. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.